the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site, covering, of course, the Arizona Cardinals. And my co-host this is a solo show. This is episode 455, and Seth is not with me for this episode. He is down for the count right now. He should be back on Tuesday to react to the final cuts that the Arizona this show going to run down after the Cardinals' preseason finale, an 18-17 comeback win over the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to talk about my roster predictions, also Seth's. I've got Seth's roster predictions and my roster predictions for the 53-man roster, kind of including everything we know from training camp to the preseason to the roster needs and more. Let's go ahead. This also includes the trades that I talked about on the show over the week, a couple of days ago in episode 454. Isaiah Simmons out, Josh Jones out, quarterback Josh Dobbs in. But I want to jump right into this because, why waste time? Quarterback. While we don't know how things are shaking out, I think we can safely say that the one thing for sure with the acquisition of Josh Dobbs is that the Cardinals are going to have Kyler Murray remain on PUP, which means he's going to be out at least the first 4 weeks of the season. And that's the way both Seth and I went. There's not really much to discuss of that. And so the three quarterbacks that they keep on the roster, Colt McCoy, Clayton Tune, and Josh Dobbs. Whatever order that ends up being, I believe it will ultimately be McCoy, Tune, Dobbs to start, maybe McCoy, Dobbs soon, but I don't think Dobbs is going to be the starter, at least early on, unless Colt McCoy is hurt. It just doesn't make sense to cut Colt McCoy. They've treated him like a starter the whole time. He's due $3 3/4 million, and $2 1/4 of that is completely guaranteed. Now, the addition of Josh Dobbs is interesting because his salary is $1.5 million completely guaranteed, and that will lead to a move somewhere down the line when it comes back, because that means they're going to have to cut somebody. They're not going to keep four quarterbacks on the roster. I don't think they'll cut Clayton too, unless they feel confident that he's not going to get claimed anywhere. But he's a quarterback. He played well in the preseason, reasonably okay, not great, but it wasn't like other rookies that we've seen. So maybe he can make it through, but otherwise Josh Dobbs get cut. Depending on when that is, it's not as much to eat. Colt McCoy, that is a little bit more. But if you get out of him what you wanted to get out of him, say it's 4 or 5 starts, maybe that's the direction they go, and they say thank you very much, and they continue to pay him his money that he's due for the rest of the season. At running back, Seth and I differ a little bit, but not actually. Yeah, we do differ a bit. We both have James Conner. We both have Keontae Ingram. But in my case, only have 3 running backs on the final 53 now, and I will explain the reason. And the reason is I think they have to cut short a position because of injuries suffered during the game. So backup center, rookie center John Gaines suffered a knee injury. Backup guard Dennis Daly, free agent addition, injured his ankle. I don't know what that means for either player moving forward, but Gaines' injury is probably one that might cause him to miss some time, maybe the first couple of games, which means they're going to need another center on the roster, and they might need another backup guard, because then what you have is your solid 3 backups with Josh Jones not on the roster, the 3 solid backups that you knew that you probably could be confident in. Backup center John Gaines, it's a rookie, Dennis Daly, and Kelvin Beachum. 2 of those 3 are currently hurt, and so that's going to change. So I shorted the running back room with the idea that probably one guy comes on he's on the practice squad, can get called up if needed. Seth has James Conner, Keontae Ingram, Tyson Williams, and Corey Clement. Reasonable. I have Connor Ingram, but rather I have Amari DiMercato, who seems to have moved up, and they do kind of like him. He does everything. He doesn't have a ton of juice, but he's reliable. He'll get the yards that are there. He can also, from his time at TCU, because he was a backup at TCU, he does things like blitz pickup. He can play special teams. They even had him returning some kicks. So while that wasn't something he didn't do in college, he did work at it and can do it. And so I think DiMercato is going to be the guy that makes the roster. For me, Corey Clement, player number 54. He was the one I cut in favor of keeping 10 offensive linemen, which, we'll kind of get to that. But Seth keeps Williams, Seth keeps Clement, and the truth is he played well in the preseason finale, rushing for 79 yards, including a 29-yard scamper. He's a veteran. He can play special teams. That was the role that he had last year. Basically, he was signed last season because Jonathan Ward got hurt, and Clement came in, filled that role, and eventually kind of creeped his way into the playing rotation right at the end of the year. However, a guy playing deep in the fourth quarter in a fourth preseason game, to me that doesn't scream he's making the roster. That screams they're auditioning him elsewhere, or he's right there in the bubble. And I would have had him on the roster, but again, I think ultimately they want 4 back, but I don't think they have room right now. And Clement is a guy that's likely going to clear waivers, for sure. Actually, he doesn't even have to clear waivers, but he'll become a free agent, and then the Cardinals probably going to bring him back to the practice squad, and he can be used for elevating at some point until they have to make a decision down the line. Wide receiver. We're both the same here. We Cardinals will only keep 5 receivers on the roster, and that will be Hollywood. That'll be Michael Wilson. That will be Rondell Moore, Zach Pascal, and Greg Dortch. No arguments there. It's felt like all 5 of those are locks for the roster. Hollywood is your main guy. Wilson and Pascal play the same position essentially, and Rondell and Dortch also guys. So you've got your backups there, and then what you're going to do, you're going to have guys in the practice squad. That's where Daniel Arias might come in. Played a ton of special teams, and was a really good special teams player at Colorado. He is, for me, a sneaky possibility for a 6th wide receiver if they keep 6. I don't think they can keep 6, but in that case, that's kind of how I feel about that. Like, if they keep 6, Arias makes that because, well, he adds that height factor, he gets something different, and his special teams prowess. He played a ton. He was great in college at it. And then guys like Caden Davis, Davion Davis, I think those guys will be possible practice squad guys. Andre Bocelli is an interesting one because he was definitely a Cliff guy, but he didn't play in the finale. I'm guessing it was because he was injured. I don't think it's because he locked up a spot on the roster. But yeah. So we'll kind of go from there. So coming up next on the Rise Up Sierra podcast, Best Hour of Cardinals Talk on the web, we've wrapped up the main skill position, quarterback, running back, receiver. Let's move on. I'll move on and talk about the next set of positions, tight end, defensive line, tight end, offensive line, and defensive line. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sierra. We're back on the Rise Up Sierra podcast, Best Hour of Cardinals Talk on the web. I'm Jess Root, and at 155, it is a solo show tonight. Recording on not a Thursday night. This is a Sunday night, the day after the Cardinals won their preseason finale. Now, by Tuesday afternoon, 1 o'clock Arizona time, the Cardinals will have to cut their roster down to 53 players. I don't know if they're going to have any trades left. I don't know if there's anyone left worth trading. Rashard Lawrence comes to mind. I don't think he's going to make the team, but, there is a defense where there's a coach that really likes him, and that'd be Vance Joseph out in Denver. Could you get anything for Rashard Lawrence? I don't know, but it's a hope. We move on to the tight end room. I guess it's just me. Moving on to the tight end room, we both, Seth and I, have the Cardinals keeping 4. The top 3, we're in agreement with. And I think those 3 are considered locks. Zach Ertz, Trey McBride, Jeff Swain. I don't think there's any question about that. Those 3 on the roster. It just depends. So where it gets tricky is, will they keep 3 or 4 on the active roster? Will they play practice squad, call up, game for the first couple of weeks of the year? Or do they keep 4 on the roster? Seth has them keeping Noah Tongai, the tight end that played for the Eagles last season. Nothing real special about his game, but play a little bit of special teams. I, on the other hand, have them keeping undrafted rookie Blake Whiteheart. He played maybe the most snaps on the Cardinals in the preseason. They played him a ton on special teams, and he was productive in the passing. He wasn't perfect, but he also, he had that highlight play in the first half where he goes up and makes a contested catch, big play. That had to help. And I'm going to add to this. There's a reason why that they're likely going to keep Whiteheart around, either on the roster or on the practice squad, is because his contract, it has $200,000 in guarantees. And so it's kind of like the Chris Streveler situation a couple of years ago. When they signed him, they guaranteed $200,000 of his salary. And now he ended up beating out Brett Hundley for the backup job. He did that outright, based on what Cliff Kingsbury said. But I think his contract means they really like him. Now, and so they're going to try. He'll at minimum be on the practice squad, but I think he is tight end 4. They either keep 3 on the roster, and Blake, and then Whiteheart makes the practice squad. But if they keep 4, I'm pretty sure it'll be Whiteheart. Although Tongai isn't a bad choice at all, because he was kind of right there in terms of the rotation as well. There's familiarity with Jonathan Gannon, and how they view him. Now, the offensive line gets tricky. I have them keeping 10. Seth has them keeping 9. Reasonable, right? That makes perfect sense. I have them keeping 10 simply because of the injury situation. I think that they're going to need that. You have to have 8 active on game day. But 2 of those 8 guys that would be active are hurt. And I don't know how long that's going to go. We know the starting 5 changed since OTAs, since minicamp. DJ Humphries left tackle, Elijah Wilkinson left guard, Yelda Froholt center, Will Hernandez right guard, and Paris Johnson is the right tackle. Who's on the bench? This is what Seth has. They have Kelvin Beachum, John Gaines, Dennis Daly, and Lecitus Smith. He does have a slash with Gaines with Hayden Howerton. And I'm guessing that's if it has to go on IR, Howerton is replacement. I didn't get an explanation from him, but that's where we go. Now, for me, Howerton is lineman number 9 for me, and here's why. Howerton, especially if Gaines has to miss any time, Howerton becomes the backup center. He was the number 3 center, unless here's the possibility. Pat Elflein, the veteran. But he obviously got hurt because the last 2 preseason games, he didn't play in the opener. And unless they are just keeping him healthy to put him on the roster, I don't think so. His contract was not, certain. But he would give them the best option behind Yelda Froholt in a pinch. John Gaines didn't look bad in the preseason by any means, but there I go. I've got Beachum, I've got Daly, I've got Gaines. I assume unless his knee injury is bad, where they have to put him on IR and the season ending, he would make the initial 53 and maybe go on IR to miss 4 games. That's my prediction. So he'd still be on the final 53. But the 2 guys that I have as linemen's 9 and 10 is Howerton. And here's an interesting thing about Howerton as well, is as my back of the rotation guy is use only in emergencies. Howerton, I mean, his PFF grade was fantastic during the preseason. But he can play guard. He can play center. And guess where he was playing most of the game on Saturday? He was playing left tackle. So he gives you true versatility across the offensive line. And that's kind of what you want at the back end, especially when you have some injury uncertainty. That's kind of the role that him playing is that him break in case of emergencies. That's that guy. Howerton is that guy. He's going to be your backup center, but if Gaines is hurt, and then now we both differ on the last offensive line. Now, granted, I have them keeping 10. The other guy is Marquise Hayes, and that is because I felt that he is probably ahead of all the other guards, on the roster. He was playing guard up in the second team with Dennis Daly. He can play left or right. Big guy. Wasn't perfect in the preseason, obviously, but I like him better than the other options that they have behind him. Now, Seth has them keeping Lecitus Smith, a guy that's really likable, been on the show actually a couple times, but gives you that center guard flexibility. And he did some snaps. I don't know what they think about Lecitus. I kind of feel like he's the very back end coaching staff, that the previous regime liked him more than this coaching staff in front office. And so I have Lecitus off the roster, though I would understand why they might do that, because he could also play center and guard, giving you some versatility there. But yeah, on the defensive line, this is where it kind of gets interesting. I think while Jonathan Gannon refuses to starters, we know who the starters are going to be because those are the guys that were held out of the game on Saturday. Not everyone. There's some injuries and there's a couple interesting decisions there. But on the defensive line, both Seth and I have them keeping 6 guys. But the 6 guys are different, which, it's good for discussion. My 6 are L.J. Collier, Lecky Fotu, and Jonathan Ledbetter, who are the starters. Then on the back end, Watkins, Kevin Strong, Dante Stills. Carlos Watkins, I think, is also kind of a lock. He did play in the preseason finale. Dante Stills, one of their draft picks, and kind of flashed. And so they could keep another guy and then, go with the practice squad option with Stills. Eric Banks made some plays, Ben Stilley, or maybe even the undrafted kid, Jacob Slade, another guy that's got some guaranteed money on his contract as an undrafted rookie. But for me, it came down to, because I felt Dante Stills is probably making the team. They like him. And I think he's disruptive enough. He gives you a little something athletically. For me, it came down to Kevin Strong versus Rashard Lawrence. And Kevin Strong's reps. Now, granted, he becomes the backup. Is on the depth charts. He's behind Lecky Fotu and ahead of Rashard Lawrence at nose tackle. But I also look at the playing time that he had in the preseason finale. He played, but he played his snaps throughout the entire game, including at the beginning, more suggesting that he's closer to making the team than not. And Rashard Lawrence's snaps, which were a little bit less than half of Strong's, all came late in the game. And so I think Rashard Lawrence is a cut guy, while Seth has them keeping Lawrence instead of Strong. I could see that going either way. Strong does have the money Fort because he played for the Titans, but they're going to ultimately keep the guys they like best. Lawrence also, we know, has a history of injuries. He hasn't had a great preseason, but that last spot on the defensive line, or second to last spot, I could see it going either way. I just think Strong is going to be the guy, especially because I think he's got more positional versatility on the defensive line as well. Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, episode of Cardinals Talk on the web. Let's kind of wrap things up and go to the linebacker positions, the secondary, and the specialists. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, but start Cardinals Talk on the web. We moved to outside linebacker, which I wrote about on Sunday, and I think it probably is the toughest room to decide for a number of reasons. it feels like to me that there's 7 guys who the coaching staff would all love to have on their roster. They might be able to do 6, maybe. Seth has them only keeping 5. I've got it keeping 6 because, here's what Seth's are. Zaven Collins, Dennis Gardeck. Those are the 2 starters as of right. That makes sense. Cameron Thomas, 3rd-round pick last year. He was pretty solid in the preseason in the camp. B.J. Ojulari, 2nd-round pick this year. And Jesse Luketa. Luketa, 7th-round pick a year ago. Really well-liked by coaching staff. Like Steve Keim loved him when they drafted him. He's like a guy you got to have on your football team. He's all-team first. He moved positions in college, and on Saturday in particular, he was showcased because he was the Cardinals team captain for the game, for the coin toss. He played special teams as he did. He played defense, and then they had him playing fullback. I don't think they're going to use him as a fullback in the regular season because I think they would rather use their tight ends, like they could use Trey McBride or Jeff Swaim to do that. But maybe, just maybe, they use the hard-hitting guy in Luketa. I think they keep Luketa as well. But I think they keep so instead, no Myjai Sanders and no Victor Dimukeje. Okay, my 5. I have the same 5 as he does, but I have Dimukeje over Sanders, and that in some ways might seem crazy. But as we saw with Isaiah Simmons, and the kind of the talk was, the reason why Simmons was cut was a matter of fit. He didn't fit quite right deeply and maybe also culturally. I don't know. I don't know everything about that, but I don't think Sanders is in the same boat. However, Sanders hurt his hand at the start of training camp. Hasn't played in the preseason. On the depth chart, he was behind Dimukeje, a 6th-round pick from 2 years ago. And Dimukeje's made some plays, and here's the other part. Dimukeje has been on so much on special teams. He had one of the most special teams on the team. And here's the curious part. He was held out of the game on Saturday. On the surface, I would say injury, but I don't know of any injury to Dimukeje he might have had. But if it's not because of injury and they were simply saving him, okay, that's a surprise. He might be a better fit for this defense, and the fact that he's going to play more special teams than Sanders. Sanders is leaner. He's a little undersized for that, but I'd be interesting to see. I'm going to be interested in how this plays out because they're either going to cut Sanders, the 3rd-round pick from a year ago, a guy, admittedly, that was productive in the preseason last year, showed some promise when he got playing time late in the year. He did generate pressure. He made some plays. So you're either going to cut that guy or you're going to cut the 2 guys that you know that coaches really like, Dimukeje and Luketa. Luketa, who does kind of everything, and Dimukeje, who's made some plays and is a little bit bigger than Sanders, not quite as athletic, but also played a ton of special teams. And so that's an interesting case there. I think inside linebacker is pretty cut and dry. I think it's cut and dry. And we both have them same 5. Kaiser White. Josh Woods has apparently won the starting job as he was held out of the game on Saturday. So it'll be Kaiser White and Josh Woods in the starting lineup. We have them both keeping Chris Barnes, former starter from Green Bay, battled Josh Woods for a starting job. Zeke Turner, special teams stud, and 5th-round rookie Owen Papo. Incredibly athletic, has a lot of upside, and he has played a ton of special teams. Now, we kind of felt that would they only keep those 5? Would they go down to 4? But Zeke has basically a fully guaranteed. His salary's mostly guaranteed, if not all guaranteed. Papa's a rookie. I think they like him. And then I could see a world where Chris Barnes is cut just to save spots somewhere else, but I don't think that's going to happen. We both have those same players on the roster. And let's go to cornerback. The cornerback, Seth has them keeping 5. 5 cornerbacks. I only have them keeping 4. That's just the numbers game there. We're both keeping Garrett Williams on the non-football injury list as he comes back from his ACL tear in college. Don't know what the plan is here. He'll have to miss at least 4 games, but he hasn't come off of that, despite his saying that hopefully by August he was going to be cleared. So either things aren't going as well, or the Cardinals are ending to redshirt him, which fine by me. Marco Wilson, Keitrell Clark, Antonio Hamilton, and Christian Matthew are the guys that I have keeping. I am not convicted on Christian Matthew. Marco Wilson, so Wilson, Clark, and Hamilton were all guys that sat out the game. Hamilton's salary is completely guaranteed, and I think that's ultimately going to be the three corner rotation. With Isaiah Simmons gone, Jalen Thompson is going to move back to safety. And we saw a lot of Antonio Hamilton the second preseason game playing in the slot. So my guess is Hamilton is the nickelback, and Wilson and Clark are the starters on the boundaries. Going to go with that. I would say keep an eye out for Bobby Price, Nate Hairston, or Chris Boyd, who's been a special team stud, but didn't play special teams during the preseason, and his playing time in the finale was late in the game. So I don't think he's going to make the roster. And so that's why I've got Christian Matthew making it. Seth has the same 4 as me, but adds undrafted rookie Quavion White. You can make a case for that. It's just he's shorting other positions that I'm not. He kept the extra cornerback, but cut an additional outside linebacker. I cut a running back in favor for an offensive lineman, which he did not do. So that's where he got it. I personally think that if we look at it, I think Bobby Price is going to be ahead, but I think Bobby Price is also a practice squad guy that they can bring up for special teams, because he also played a ton of special teams as well. And then it's safety. We know Buddha's going to be there. We know Jalen Thompson's going to be there. The next 2 are intriguing. We both have Andre Sachere, special teams guy, knows the defensive system, played with Jonathan Gannon last year in Philadelphia. Sachere, who's actually he was originally an undrafted rookie with the Cardinals and didn't make the team, but has found a spot. He came in as a cornerback, and he's playing more safety now. Seth has them keeping Juju Hughes as the second guy, and I rather instead have Javonte Moffitt. Hughes, earlier in the preseason, was safety number 4, like he was the first in when Buddha wasn't playing or when JT came out. But he played later in the game on Saturday than other guys. Javonte Moffitt and Sachere were the 2 that started. And I think that's the way they go. But, at that safety position, ultimately, I feel like that 4th spot is interchangeable. I don't think it's tough a decision. It's just what they're looking for. Special teams, though, we do know what's going to be, unless, it's a lock. You've got Matt Prater kicking. You've got Nolan Cooney punting after he won the starting job. He won the battle against Matt Hawk. And then the long snapper is Aaron Brewer. But we knew that was going to play out like that anyway. So there we have it. What do you think about it? Make sure, let us know on social media, on Twitter, or known as X now, or whatever it is. Like, where do you think we got it wrong? How close will both I and Seth be? Who will have the better set of predictions? The next time we are on, it will be Tuesday night, so you'll get it Wednesday during the day at some point when I publish that show live, reacting to the Cardinals roster cuts. When we record, we won't know about the practice squad. We can predict that, and I can comment on that on the later show that week. But as for this show, we are done. This is episode 455. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening always, and we'll be back with Seth in a couple of days. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise up, See Red.